Welcome to Aarhus for leg 6 of the 14th edition of the Ocean Race. Aarhus on the east coast of Denmark has welcomed the Ocean Race fleet for a second edition, but this time it was more than just a flyby. The sailors have enjoyed 12 days ashore, where the crowds have been able to congratulate them for the great sailing we've seen over the last 30,000 nautical miles. Today, our 5 teams leave the city of Aarhus, the shores of Denmark, and sail the shortest leg of this edition, 800 nautical miles via Kiel to The Hague, and it begins just in front of this harbour city in a few minutes' time. Fantastic scenes in the ocean life part for the spectators, but now their attention turns to the drama waiting for them out on the water as we get ready to start the race. And joining me for commentary is Dee Kafari. And Dee, the big question is going to be what the weather is going to do and what the breeze is waiting for them. But either way, this leg is going to be tricky.
Tricky. It may be the shortest leg, but I think it's going to be the toughest one to date.
And the big question is there answered on that helicopter shot. We have got Boris Herman, the skipper of Team Militia, to give us an update on the conditions out on the racetrack.
Do you like it when it's light like this?
There's no wind at all. Normally you cannot race now. There was wind 10 minutes ago, but it's shutting down at the moment. Will is calling the race committee. Yeah.
It's a drift out on the racetrack, but of course these sailors have been through a lot before as this race has wrapped its way around the world.
The race, divided into 7 legs, has already seen the boats complete a sprint from Alicante, Spain to Cabo Verde, before heading down to the southern tip of Africa to Cape Town. Then came the record-breaking leg, 12,750 nautical miles, the 1-month marathon, worth double points through the Southern Ocean from Cape Town to Itajaí, Brazil. Then, with the crews afforded some time to breathe after leg 3, they raced north across the equator and up to Newport on the east coast of the United States, before returning to Europe on a double points transatlantic leg to Aarhus, Denmark. Now the fleets have a short coastal journey, first down to a rounding mark in the sailing city of Kiel, Germany, en route to The Hague, the Netherlands. Finally, after a short pit stop, the fleet will return to the Mediterranean for the grand finale, this offshore leg to Geneva, Italy.
2 more offshore legs remaining in this 14th edition of the Ocean Race. Not a lot of breeze out there waiting for the teams. It is tricky, and as we were hearing Boris Herman say before, there's just no breeze, but there's starting to be some ripples out in the water, so perhaps the conditions have changed a little bit. We are seeing enough breeze moving that we are registering 4 kilometers per hour from the southeast down on the race committee boat. And of course, this leg will be starting on time. I mean, indeed, that's just the nature of offshore racing. Breeze, no breeze, we go.
Well, and we're sailors and we're never happy. Too much, too little, not the right direction, too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. It's just one of those challenges we've got to face, but this is going to be so frustrating for a race star of such a complex and tactical leg that lays ahead.
And all of these teams are going to have to face it, so let's get a closer look at the sailors out there on the water today. Well, first up, 11th Hour Racing Team and Charlie Enright's team is fresh from back-to-back leg wins, putting them on the top spot of the overall leaderboard. It's far from comfortable lead, though, so no surprise to see them bring in offshore heavyweight and previous Ocean Race winner Frank Camus at this stage of the race. They are clearly aiming to build on their performance from the last leg. Team Wholesome PRB's new skipper Benjamin Schwartz has had little time to settle into his new role, but for these coastal legs he's got help. Abby Ehler has been with the boat from the start and knows the hardware, while 2-time Solitaire de Figaro winner Johan Richomme is going to be the ace up his sleeve in this leg as they hug the coastline. Team Militia and Boris Herman's German team will certainly have an enthusiastic welcome in Kiel, but their focus will be on performance, and they need nothing less than a top finish here on the last 2 remaining legs if they want to lift the trophy in Geneva. Bioterm, and after such a tough transatlantic leg and only arriving a day before the intra race last week, they went on to win that event, and their renewed confidence is clear to see. The team is looking for a chance to show what they can do, and Paul says his boat suits this short coastal course. Perhaps they could win again in this offshore leg starting today. Guyot Environment Team Europe. This team have been absent for the race for weeks, but very much hard at work. They have a new mast, repaired foils, and the crew lineup is the same that won the Ocean Race Europe in 2020. 2 German sailors on board this European team, meaning that the Kiel flyby will hold a special significance. Well, the scoreboard, the overall positions here for the IMOCA class, and it is 1 point, is all that separates first to second, with Team Holcim PRB, the boat that led for so much of the race, now in second after 11th Hour Racing Team's strong performance in the last 2 legs. In third, 4 points off the lead, is Team Militia, and while they have a little more ground to make up, the German team could spring forward if they can win the next 2 legs. Well, Dee, talk us through how this leg is shaping up.
Well, if we're going to get any wind and we can get any movement, hopefully the import section of this next leg will look as follows. Very similar to what we've seen before. Just outside the harbour here, we go through the start line on a reach, trying to be at top speed. We go round on a left-hand turn round the square, all the way through start line again. We're going for 2 laps if possible, that critical jibe and that critical tack. Before we go through the start line, then marks 1 and 2 for the leaving gate, and then off to Kiel.
As you say, the big question is whether they're going to be breeze, and for our helicopter that wasn't an issue. They did a flyby of the course earlier, so we get the point of view from the sailor's perspective at pretty much mast height, and from the start it's going to be down to those 2 marks waiting for them at the far end. Left-hand turns, and here at mark 1 you're going to begin that short downwind section, 1 jibe and then another left-hand turn before you start that second reach, much longer and taking you back towards the starting side of the racetrack. Here it's going to be all about speed, adjustment as the breeze is going to come and go, and sailing through those patches of wind before you then come to mark 3 and another left-hand turn. This one taking you upwind. 1 tack, and hopefully keeping all the furls and deployment of the new sails clean as you steer the boat through the wind, and then it's turning around mark 4 and back through the start-finish line to complete the first lap. We are confirmed as to how light the breeze is, and at this point we'll bring in Mark Towell, our third commentator, joining me in the box here. And Mark, there's your boat, 11th Hour Racing Team, out there on the water. They are, well, I mean, it's all pretty light right now, but everyone's got multiple sails in the air. Everyone's not too sure as to exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a really tricky time for the start here. Usually the leg starts are a bit earlier in the afternoon, and right now we've got a southeasterly sea breeze fighting the northwesterly gradient, and so the teams will need to keep their eyes out and be looking for where the breeze is going to come from.
And I mean, we knew that the wind was potentially going to be light, but now a bit of restacking here. I guess they were probably waiting to do this, and now here we go, adjustment.
Yeah, we may be getting ready for the northwesterly gradient to come in, and therefore moving the stack to the other side of the boat.
We've got Frank Camas down on the right-hand side. Francesca Klapcic, been with the team since the beginning, working pretty hard, pulling those sails round. And Dee, Frankie was with you in the last edition on Turn the Tide on Plastic. She's a bit of a weapon to have on any boat.
She is a weapon. She's got an Olympic background, but absolutely thrived in the offshore environment, loves it. Is a real workhorse as well. And you just saw her then just receiving stuff being thrown at her by Frank Camas. I'd be super excited to be sailing with Frank Camas. And if he threw stuff at me, I'd take it as a compliment.
Interesting just to contrast the hard work going on down below with the kind of soft, well, staying calm there of the navigator from Simon Fisher on board. I mean, I'm guessing for the navigators, it's been a headache for a while.
Yeah, it's going to be a really tough leg for the navigators. We feel, you know, on the 11th Hour Racing Team side, grateful to have Sci-Fi and all of his experience. And in the words of Bill Belichick, everyone just needs to do their job. And so Sci-Fi's there doing his job, preparing for the weather and what's to come, and everyone else preparing the boat.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now.
5 4-minute countdown started, and earlier on I did see Team Wholesome PRB, and now Bioterm down on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, moving quite fast, but don't be fooled, that's just the engine on. They're allowed to run their engines until the 4-minute mark. From there, they're going to need to be relying on what little breeze there is. I mean, D, we are starting on time. We are going for it, but how on earth are they going to actually cross that line?
Well, that's going to be really tactical now. They can't afford to get too far away. And it's probably, we don't often see a IMOCA engine moving a boat very fast. They're designed to a thrust capacity, and generally they're like a little egg whisk in any breeze when you're trying to maneuver a boat in tight confines. So it was quite impressive to see it moving so well, but they're going to want to turn that engine off with as maximum momentum and try and keep it. So minimise manoeuvres, point in a straight line, and just hope you can keep that momentum to cross the start line at the go gun.
Well, there's the 4 minutes, and the engines will now be shifted into neutral gear. They might still be running, powering the electronics, but they're not allowed to push the boats forward. There is enough breeze here to fill the sails. 11th Hour Racing Team with the bow down now. Team Wholesome PRB, their big masthead Code Zero also coming out as well. Abiela on the bow. And Mark, this is a relief here. Enough breeze to get going.
Yeah, it looks like we should have enough breeze to get the race underway. And again, I think the sailors will be pushing the boats hard, trying to maximize every bit of speed that they can out of what breeze there is, but also anticipating that transition that will be coming.
Experienced eyes as well, looking up to windward, will be absolutely the key. Team Wholesome PRB out on the water, trying to find everything. Johan Rishom on board this boat, a big ace up their sleeve to start this leg with.
What's happening with the breeze right now?
The breeze is dying. We had the thermal breeze from the south, and now we know it's going to transition to a breeze from the northwest over there. And it looks like we're getting into that transition area now around start time, which is only going to make things a little bit more complicated.
That was his thoughts just a couple of moments ago, and his prediction was correct. The wind has done a full 180 swing, and if anything, it looks like it's building. Certainly Abiela all the way forward on the bowsprit is clearly leading that boat well. It's running well, but look at that, just underneath their masthead Code Zero, it is Team Militia. This is almost the reverse, D, of what we saw in Newport. Windward lured, it was actually the other way round, and it was Team Militia that was barging on Team Wholesome PRB. They've decided, well, you got away with it in Newport, we'll have some of that action here.
It's funny how those two boats seem to gravitate towards each other in a pre-start sequence. But the secret here is no boat wants to do a manoeuvre, so they literally all just need to keep momentum, keep any movement they have. But in order to keep that momentum, you've got to go bow down when you can. So Abby's got her eyes out, just making sure they don't infringe on Militia and take a protest.
And they're all quite close to the start line. I think they've decided to get close to the start line in case the breeze goes light. But actually, if it stays just as we're seeing now, just a little puff above the minimum, actually, they're going to close that distance quite fast. We have got 1 minute 30 to go on the clock. Certainly, Guyot Environment Team Europe, as we can see, luffing up their heading and their Code Zero now, devoid of any breeze. They are really having to slow down, dangerously close to the line. They can do it. But of course, as you're saying, D, they're not really going to have the momentum with them. This is going to come down to time on distance.
It's critical, but we saw in the import race, Paul Mayat had that nailed, and so we'll be looking for Bioterm to see if they can continue that confidence they saw on Sunday into this leg. He's normally very good at race starts, so this will be really interesting. But you see Guyot there, the way they've just stopped almost from where they killed their speed, it's almost cost them.
The view from Guyot Environment Team Europe, but looking up to windward, we have got Team Wholesome PRB and Team Militia locked together here. "35 seconds to go, and I don't think that Team Wholesome PRB is going to get a route to the line, to the windward side of Team Militia. Abiela on the bow. Can they bear away? It is very close. They just managed to swing to that leeward position of Team Militia. Now, the rules are now reversed. It is now Team Militia that has to keep clear. Team Militia putting that bow right the way down now. That's going to accelerate them, and they are very close to infringing here. 10 seconds to go. Bioterm down at the far end. Guyot Environment Team Europe trying to come through. Team Militia definitely over the line. They had to go down to defend, but it pushed them over the line, and that is a disastrous way ready to start a light wind race. This turn back round through the line once again to work themselves clear, that is going to really hurt their boat speed. They're staying high to try and get themselves enough room. They've elected to go for the jibe. Certainly smart in my eyes, but they're going to have to sail the wrong direction, clear over the other side of the line before they can make any progress. I mean, D, that really turned for them, and in that final 35 seconds, Team Holcim PRB did a great job.
That was really costly though, and we said, you know, those two boats gravitate together, have a reputation now for giving each other a hard time. We predicted it and it happened, which is foolish. I think in these light conditions you can't do that.
They're certainly paying for it. They have now reached the line. They've got to sail every single part of their boat across it before they can turn around once again. And all the time, these boats are making the distance. Not so much Guyot Environment Team Europe. They are down in 4th place, and they haven't quite got the breeze. The boat that we can't see, though, Mark, your team, 11th Hour Racing Team, by my eye, got the best start there.
Yeah, tough to say. I think we did a nice job there being in the middle of the line and staying outside of all the action at the upper end and just giving ourselves an opportunity to be full speed at go. I thought Team Holcim PRB did a nice job at getting bow back and being able to get behind Team Milizia in order to reestablish that leeward overlap. Classic match racing move, and they executed it perfectly.
I'm sure that Team Holcim PRB, was still a little bit sore of what we saw on the start at Newport. Okay, this is how it looked on board Team Milizia.
Big fairway, big fairway.
That was how close that bear away was. And then this is the moment here where obviously as the leeward boat, Team Holcim PRB was able to charge forward. Team Milizia tried to bear away. You could hear Will Harris say, big bear away, protect that overlap. But as they did it, they just closed down to the start line a little too early. Now they are clear, now they are through, but look at how much they have lost. In normal circumstances, you'd say maybe that was only 10 seconds, but Mark, this is light breeze, and that's going to take them a full 2 minutes to make that distance up.
Yeah, and particularly in the light air with two downspeed maneuvers like that, it'll take them a while to get back up to speed, but at least they're headed the right direction, and they'll be working hard to minimize that distance.
Meanwhile, in the lead, 11th Hour Racing Team, I say in the lead, narrowly in the lead. This is going to be so crucial to keep your sails clear. Team Holcim PRB, as the windward boat, further down the bottom of our picture, has a little bit more chance to put the bow down. This live shot now seems to, I would say, encourage the situation for 11th Hour Racing Team. They just seem a little bit more slippery there. Abby Ehler on the bow of Team Holcim PRB, having a look round the Jenica. D, this first reach, keeping your sails clear. I mean, this is when your heart rate's going to be at its peak.
Well, just everybody on the line together, and as you say, 11th Hour Racing just had their little bow ahead, and that allows them now to pull in front and get that clear breeze on their sails. Once you can get clear breeze, it makes it much easier on the reach. And then it's about getting your bow in front and staying in front then for the manoeuvres. So they've done a great job, but they're literally just to weather of Beertherm. So when they get to that mark, Beertherm will be on the inside. So it'll be really interesting to see if 11th Hour Racing can accelerate just a little bit more to get clear ahead of Beertherm on the inside.
You are absolutely right about the position of Paul Mayer and Beertherm. They are a long way to leeward of the run line, but maybe they've been forced down their mark because they weren't going to pass to leeward close to your boat.
Yeah, Paul and his team did a nice job starting at the pin end of the line in the import race, and that was a winning strategy, so not surprised to see them give it a try again. Interesting to see from this shot how we've got our weather rudder up, and I think Team Holcim PRB does as well. We haven't seen that in any of the import race starts or the leg starts yet, but it is so light that I think they have the time to get the rudder up and then back down before the next maneuver.
A change in mentality from what we've seen then previously. You've got to realize that this race is going to be longer, it's going to be slower. You're going to have more time. Potentially we might be able to see those foils coming in and out as well, but Beertherm haven't at the moment lifted that windward rudder, but look at the concentration here.
It always just amazes me how calm and relaxed Paul is. It seems like he's unfazed, whether he's in front or behind. He keeps that same demeanor and that same cool, calm, collected approach. He's an all-star sailor.
It's so important when the conditions are like this, and also when the combination of boats is like this, the positions are like this. any moment where you just pull a little bit too hard, you know, you fall out of sync with the changing breeze, it's going to cost you. These are heavy boats. You come off the pace, it'll take a while to get them going again.
Well, they're performance boats, so, you know, relatively they're not that heavy, but in these conditions they're going to feel heavy. Everything needs to be super smooth. And we were talking earlier when we watched the VO65s about tiptoeing around the boat, keeping it gentle. It's even more relevant on the IMOCAs. We're used to seeing images of them smashing across the Atlantic into Aarhus, and now we've got them gliding effortlessly, but it takes a lot of concentration to do that. So movements from the people are very smooth, and also therefore the movements of the helm need to be really smooth. That rudder they do have in the water is very big, and you don't want to be moving it too much.
Just looking at this helicopter shot that we've got here at the top of the screen, we can see a little bit of breeze coming in, and it could be that new gradient breeze could be filling from the northwest. If that does happen, the breeze will be coming from the other side. The boats will actually shift onto port jibe on this particular reach, and the whole course will essentially invert. So it'll be very interesting to see how that transition plays out.
All of the teams will be watching, well, at water height, they'll be watching what we've seen. Normally, sometimes in the race, you'll be seeing people going up the rigs, trying to get a little bit of a look. Obviously, for the import section, there's not that many choices. They've got to be following a pretty tight course, so I wouldn't expect to see anybody climbing the mast at this point, but they'll be desperate to know what is in store as we go on board with Bioterm. The boat right now in second place on that leeward position. Behind them, you can see Guyot Environment, Team Europe, and Team Militia. As the bows, they're just lapping the water. Such difference in the design of these boats. You've got that double knuckle of Bioterm, and then the strawberry bow of 11th Hour Racing Team. It's much more conventional looking at it in profile here.
It is, and if we could see Militia closer to these guys, you'll see another bow as well. So we really do see the individual designs where IMOCAs meet a box rule, but within that they can design what they want and what they think is going to work for what races they're doing.
We actually designed this boat before COVID, when the ocean race was planning on going all the way up to Asia and into China. And so we were looking at much more of a reaching and upwind race course. I think Militia and some of the newer designs have really demonstrated their strength in the downwind conditions. And so what it really just shows is every boat has their day.
The day right now, or certainly the opening stages of the start of leg 6, is going for Team Militia, or at least the last minute has. Look at this, they're going over the windward side of Guyot Environment, Team Europe. It's almost as if they're leaving the European team standing still. Boris Herman, Will Harris, that move on the start line, putting them over the line, but they have caught back well.
Yeah, there's a bit of a header.
With your back against the cabin, please.
There's quite some wind shear in the jib. Quite nice.
So much work going on and so much concentration that we see on the face of the helms, but amazing to look inside and see how hard the trimmers are working too.
That's right, and we heard Rosie there mention shear, and that's when the wind instruments at the aloft at 30 metres up in the air is going to say one thing, and your sail shape at the bottom of the sail is saying something completely different, and it really makes for confusion on the boat of where the wind's actually coming from and what you're feeling.
And you can hear Rosie talking about it as well on the sails. Lots of shear, but plenty to come.
Perfect shot here to see the difference in the breeze. There is wind out there, but there is pockets of it. Guyot Environment, Team Europe have got probably the worst combination right now because they're in light winds like everybody, but they have a boat firmly on their windward side blocking their sails. And you see the frustration on the crew members as they are making their way back now. Philip, not happy about how the opening stages of leg 6 is going at the moment, but it's a long way to go. Meanwhile, on the bow, Bioterm, everybody's forward on these boats, and everybody who is out of the cockpit has got their eyes up to windward.
Yeah, they're all looking for what pressure they can find. They're also aware that this transition is coming, And it's about recognising it and using the spectators to make it clear, looking for it on the water. And geographically, the way they're positioned, Beotherm is to the north and the west, so they, in theory, could get the transition first, but they are closer in. So if it's coming off the land, it might not get to them and it might go further out. So it's really interesting in these light conditions of where it's going to come first. But Guyot Environment are doing well. They have to remember they've got an older generation boat compared to the rest of the fleet. It is slightly heavier and it is going to struggle in these sticky conditions.
At the moment, the breeze has been relatively steady in terms of direction. It's been coming in at about 130 degrees and it's pretty much still there, but the wind speed has dropped again after the start. Mark, we're waiting for this transition. A wind speed drop, a good sign?
Yeah, generally with the sea breeze here, it should be dropping in terms of velocity, and that'll allow that northwesterly gradient to push in. You see here with the shot from behind, there still is decent pressure. We got a little bit of heel in the boat, and it seems like they're doing their best to keep the boat powered up and moving fast.
Charlie Enright on the windward side of 11th Hour Racing Team, tiller in hand, trying to find the perfect balance of steering to the breeze and that changing direction, but also holding the course steady enough to keep the momentum going and use the rudder as smoothly as possible. The marks, the first turning mark at this point, seem quite a way away, but we are about a quarter left to run of this first top reach. And the downwind section, as Mark 1 comes into view, is certainly going to be painful for these teams. If they feel under power on this reach D, the downwind is going to be excruciating.
Yeah, this turning mark's going to be quite painful. And the worst thing for Charlie there is he's going to get to it first. So as he bears away, he's going to see his boat speed slip away, and the others then can close in. But they're going to have to go through the pain as well. So he just needs to tough it out, time his jibe perfectly and do a clean manoeuvre, which is going to be tough in these light winds, because he'll be the first one back on the reach going back the other way, where he'll get the advantage.
Light winds here in Aarhus for the start of leg 6, but enough to see our 5 IMOCA boats managing to crawl their way through the water as we approach the first turning mark of this import section. Team Wholesome PRB to Leeward. It hasn't worked out for them in the way that they would like, Mark, but they are able to sail into this first mark at a tighter angle to the breeze, which should mean more power for them.
I actually think that's Beotherm coming in from the leeward side there, and they've been able to capitalize on that position, getting back in line quite a bit, and looks like they'll be able to stay in front of Team Wholesome PRB.
Team Wholesome PRB in third place, Beotherm in second, 11th Hour Racing Team in the lead. We start now to establish an order, but the next short section of this import race that begins leg 6 is going to be a real potential nightmare, certainly for the leaders 11th Hour Racing Team. They now are about to bear away, and the question will be, how much of a turn do they make? If this was offshore, really they'd be holding quite a tight angle to the wind as much as they can, but they can't risk letting anyone behind them sail a more downwind course, if that is indeed possible. Charlie Enright, the skipper of 11th Hour Racing Team, has a very big decision to make.
And the mistake here is really to choose a ley line that's too soon. When you have a lead like this and a little bit of space, what you can do is make sure you call a nice conservative ley line, and if you overcook it a bit, you can come up with a hotter angle on the next jibe and make all that distance back. So let's see how they choose this ley line.
They are really not bearing away at all, D. I mean, they have barely turned 15 degrees to the left.
I know, when you look from the aerial shot there, it looks like they don't know where they're going, that they're not going around the course, but they've just got to keep that boat moving. And if we look, there's a dark patch of water just ahead of them, and that's what it looks like they're going into, where we think that's more pressure. Now, the temptation for Beotherm to cut the corner will be great, because they will want to try and do what they can to get in front. But we know that if they go low and slow, they're just going to fall out the pack, and it'll just be so painful to then build the speed and momentum again.
And as the camera pans round, you can see how little breeze there is to leeward at that mark. Behind Beotherm, of course, Team Wholesome PRB will also be facing the same decision and ready to pounce whether Paul Mayer makes the wrong call. And I guess for Benjamin Schwartz on Team Holcim PRB, he's got the benefit of 2 boats ahead. He can now use both of their courses to try and find out what his course is. Windward Rudder on Team Holcim PRB now going down into the water. Abby Eel on the bow, eyes underneath the foot of the head sail as 11th Hour Racing Team have jibed.
Yeah, we've just jibed onto port. Looks like a little bit slow to get our J0 out, but it is coming out, and I'm sure they'll get the boat up going quickly. Abby doing a nice job here on the bow, keeping an eye out for breeze and calling the relative angles.
So far, it seems like the Americans have been able to stay in the breeze, still moving. Second place, Bioterm, easing that enormous code 0 because now it is their turn to jibe. Look at that. In terms of a zigzag downwind, that really is an acute angle, isn't it? Bioterm now round, and it's perfectly timed with that masthead code 0. It's a slow turn, so it's easy to have enough time to pull that fill back in, but there's still things that can go wrong if you're not quite in sync with the helm. Team Holcim PRB will be next to turn. And now we get the problem of the battens, Dee. I mean, you know this very well in these boats. The battens are pretty stiff here.
It is, and we've got to remember he's trying to pull a sail that's going up 33 metres to try and flick that top batten through. The easiest way when you've got a crew of 10 is to put somebody up there to give it a quick kick on the way through. But when there's only 4, you can't risk losing somebody up the rig. So they'll be easing the Cunningham, winding on runner, and wiggling that main sheet as much as possible to make that batten pop.
Yeah, and it's always a tough one in this situation when you're trying to pop your battens. When you shake the bottom of the mainsail like that, it's incredibly... you add a lot of drag to the whole sail, and you really just shake the whole boat. It really slows everything down. But at the same time, if you don't get the battens through and you leave them pop the wrong way, there's a lot of aero drag up there, and so ultimately you do need to get the battens through, and you got to try to get it done as quickly as possible.
Team Holcim PRB also through their jibe, and I guess for 11th Hour Racing Team relief, as they are now round Mark 2 and they are off on that long reach as Team Holcim PRB come round after their jibe, and Team Militia now round Mark 1. And down on the water we have Thomas Julian, the class measurer for the IMOCAs. He's there, and I guess the big thing that we all want to know is what's the breeze going to do in the next stage of this race.
I think one of the explanations of the speed of 11th Hour Racing right now is that their foil design allows them to get clear out of the water when they retract it, and in this condition every bit of drag counts, and that might be one of the reasons why they have a little speed edge over the fleet right now.
I wonder, Thomas, where you were at that start, because while we're watching these boats on that, now starting that long reach back, I mean, I'm just reminded of how close it was at that start line and how Team Holcim PRB and Team Militia just seem to be glued to each other.
Yeah, no, on Chase Boat 1 we're a little bit in front of the start line, so I didn't have the greatest angle to judge the distance between the boats. I'm sure you had a better view than I did.
Well, from where we were, it looks like these two boats were certainly settling a little bit of a grudge. You know these sailors very well, Tamar. You're jumping on and off these boats. You're always making sure that everything's within the rules. But you know, these are your colleagues and your friends as well. I mean, at this point, seeing Guyot Environment Team Europe back in the race, this is pretty special.
It is absolutely awesome to have them back with us, and I really wish them the best for the last legs in this race. It's been a tremendous effort from so many people to get them back in, so it's a huge congratulations for them, and so rewarding for everybody to see them sailing today.
If only it could be better breeze for Guyot Environment Team Europe, or all of our teams, we'd have a slightly more energetic departure from Aarhus. But it does mean that for the spectators, they get longer to enjoy these state-of-the-art IMOCAs racing through the calm waters of Aarhus, the venue that sees so many Denmark Olympic hopefuls training out here in the summer months. But Mark, just turning to what Thomas was saying about your foils there, do you think that's a fair observation about the ability to pull them out of the water?
Yeah, that was a big part of the design philosophy, was to be able to get the foils all the way out of the water when retracted, but then get them incredibly deep into the water when at full extension. I think we have the narrowest foil shaft radius in the whole fleet, and that is one of the benefits that comes with it.
It's so difficult designing a boat that's not only going to perform at this moment now that we see flat water reaching in, well, sub 3 knots, but also you've got to make a boat that's going to perform in 45, 50 knots and incredible waves. Where on earth do you find the compromises that need to be made?
Well, I think that's the art and the science coming together of naval architecture. You really can't design a boat that's going to be everything in all conditions, and so you have to decide where you want to focus your efforts and where you're happy to give up a little bit of performance.
That shot right now, as we look back, really does show the power of those two foils for 11th Hour Racing Team. Both of them were clean out of the water. Behind in second place, Bioterm, not looking too bad, but still that leeward one just tickling the water. D, we talk about the high tech, talk about the foils and everything, but at the end of the day, sometimes it just means dragging all the gear up to the bow. Everything is stacked forward on this boat.
Yeah, we had an indication of that when we saw Frank Camas and Francesca Klapčić down below on 11th Hour Racing, just reorganising the stack. And I think it's the reality of what they actually found out there. They were like, okay, we need to move this stack, keep it forwards. Again, we want to try and reduce the wetted surface area to reduce that drag and try and keep momentum. So, you know, as the wind changes, all these things change on board as well. So not just the visible on deck stuff, but also below deck, there's an awful lot going on.
You said an important word there. You said the wind changes. I'm looking at the sheeting angles of these boats. Right now, they are all pointing towards the end of the reaching leg. They're pointing at the mark, but they look awfully trimmed in. I just checked the wind data coming in from the course. It looks like we've had a 40-degree shift. Mark, the first sign, wind going light, now potentially the shift.
Yeah, it looks like they are going more upwind. I think you're right there, Niall. And here we see Gio trying to get their battens popped as they come through their jibe. I'll just take a second to really commend these guys for all the work they've done to get back into this race, and really also all of the entire Ocean Race family that's gone into put hard work into getting these guys back here. It's a tremendous statement for the strength of this race and the strength of this team.
You're not going to mention it, but I'm going to mention it because I think it's really quite remarkable. That's your mast. That's your team's mast on board this boat. I mean, everyone's played a part in some way.
Yeah, it is our spare mast, but other teams have helped out as well, and the Ocean Race organization has been a big part of helping these guys get back here. I think a big thing in this event is with so many stopovers that you do face adversity in different ways, but ultimately the goal is to try to get all the boats to the finish, and that's a big part of the story.
I was on board this boat earlier today walking around on the deck, and it was amazing to see all the yellow circles that they have made on the deck, where I'm guessing they found a little bit of delamination damage where things have fallen down. The marks of how much work this has taken are clear to see.
Yeah, these guys got their boat off of the ship that came across from Halifax just a few days ago. They've been working around the clock in Kiel to repair the boat, to step the mast, and were able to get over to Aarhus yesterday. Received an incredibly warm welcome, and I'm sure they're happy to be on the water today.
I think you need to release the outboard.
It's released, Phil needs to pull it out. Play the top side.
Amazing to hear on board those little bit of dynamics. And D, I can hear Annie Lush clearly at the end there. You've sailed with Annie, with Team SCA. She always seems on this team like the backstop, you know, that person of confidence when they need it.
She's so switched on with the trim book. You know, she's a natural trimmer. She knows what she wants and how to achieve what she wants. She also knows what the setup should be and helps everybody get back on the same page if there's been any confusion. She'll have a spreadsheet for everything, so they will have all been well drilled. But she doesn't lose focus, and actually these kind of environments for Olympians with that kind of mindset, they love this. They love this challenge of boat on boat. I've got to get every inch I can out this sail, and I've got to keep the boat moving. This next 800 miles she will love.
If you wanted to make a comparison here on the foil design, this is the shot that you would need. And look at the curve of the boat right at the back of the picture. Team Militia in 4th place at the moment. An absolutely full whisker curl there, Mark.
Yeah, we see really big differences in the foil designs in this fleet. This shot just does an incredible job at showing how round that foil is on Team Malizia. You see a bit of that with Team Holcim PRB, and then Biotherm's foil is the straightest. What we can't see is some of the differences in how blunt the leading edge is, the sort of curve, the overall shapes, but regardless, lots going on here with the foils.
And D, I think important to point out that those foils on Team Malizia, the ones with the big curve, they're not the ones that were meant to be with Team Malizia. Those foils actually belong to Sam Davies.
That's right. When Boris finished the Route de Rome, he had issues with his foils and delamination in the foil casing. When he got back to Alicante to prepare for the start of the race, it was a big case of we need to change these foils. And luckily Initiative Kerr projects came up with the goods. And so this is a really nice test for Sam to see how her foils have performed around the world ahead of when she uses them.
And they seem to have been pretty strong. This Team Malizia is now the fastest monohull, certainly over 24 hours out there on the water. So something's certainly going right in those boats. Never one thing, but the foils are not slowing it down. Team Holcim BRB seems to be slipping slightly down to leeward as Team Malizia trying to make their way over to windward, trying to find a way through. But on board Team Holcim PRB, that new skipper, Benjamin Schwartz, has been working very hard right now to try and find some good speed now. We can see that crew forward on Team Holcim PRB, keeping that weight forward, trying to find the best of the breeze, and look at how fickle the wind is. Just watch the logo on the luff, the front edge of Team Holcim PRB. There is very little breeze out there. Benjamin Schwartz on Team Holcim PRB needs all of his concentration to keep this boat moving here on the waters of Aarhus.
Ben, what are we seeing at the moment?
At the moment, this little thermal breeze is dying. We see on the shore it's white and flat, meaning there is no wind, so we are expecting the transition to the synoptic wind from the northwest. So we're gonna probably have to be sail for a few hours, or hopefully less. J'ai l'impression qu'on est très plat de bordure par rapport à eux devant, quoi.
The frustration for any sailor here, absolutely clear to see. Going to be hard work for all of our teams here in the light winds as we start leg 6. Patience game here, waiting for the breeze to arrive. Mark, the sails are starting to luff a little bit now. You might want it, you might wish it, but there's very little you can do right now. Just is waiting out for that next puff.
Yeah, these conditions are actually, in my opinion, some of the most challenging you can possibly have. They require maximum concentration. You've got to be trying to get every single ounce of speed out of the boat. You've got to be really light on your feet and trying to not disturb the momentum that you have, and you've got to be head out of the boat looking for the next pressure.
As a competitor, what do you prefer? They're different skills here, isn't it? 35 knots and sort of hanging on, facing down some very extreme, fearful feelings, or the light winds, the tweaking. What's your favorite?
I think for me, it's the variety that keeps this sport so interesting. You can have days like this, or you can have import races like in Cape Town, where we've got 40 knots and the boats are entirely out of control, and everything in between that. And so that's what makes our sport so exciting.
D, for you, I know someone like Annie Lush, I remember her telling me that actually she really missed not doing the doldrum racing because she loves that light wind, that tweaking. Maybe that's the Olympian in her. What about yourself?
Well, I agree with Mark, but it's almost easier in a way to deal with the big breeze because you function, you have to get things done, you have to reduce sail, and you're almost forced into how to behave. Whereas this is a real feel, and you work really differently with different people. So sometimes you get a combination that really clicks, or you're really on it and you just love that kind of interaction that you have, and other times it just doesn't click and you're just not feeling it. And the best thing is to recognize that and hand the helm over to somebody else or the trim over to somebody else, because it takes an awful lot of concentration. You're exhausted even though it's not physically demanding.
so little really is acknowledged about just how exhausting it is. Like you say, the headache-inducing sunshine staring at either the numbers or that little bit of cotton wool, that little bit of wind indicator on the sail up the top of the rig. It's such hard work. But for 11th Hour Racing Team, they're apparently making it look pretty easy. They are gliding through here. Mark, your boat, boom, above the center line. Not always that usual in sailing. They're managing to find a trim that works for them.
Yeah, they seem to have a good speed at the moment, and we've got an onboard shot here from Pierre, our fill-in OBR for Amory Ross, who suffered an injury on the last leg. But just a great shot here. It looks like we're doing a nice job at keeping the sails full, keeping the momentum going, keeping the mo going, as Charlie says. And you can see Frank down there inside the bubble, keeping an eye on the trim as well. Nice shot.
Very challenging conditions here in Aarhus. It's going to be hard to try and find the next buffer breeze, but we might be seeing the transition starting to come here. 11th Hour Racing Team managing to keep something in their head sail to keep themselves moving. Charlie Enright looks very comfortable there, Mark. He's seeming like, always interesting. I think you can tell so much about the shoulders of a helm in these kind of conditions. He seems pretty relaxed.
He does seem pretty relaxed with that floppy hat. It looks like he's standing on, getting ready for the 4th of July parade in Bristol, Rhode Island. He's got the comms helmet on. He's talking to the crew down below, but I think he's trying to stay focused and keep the boat moving as fast as he can.
The good news is, or certainly the good news for our IMOCA sailors, the course has been shortened. We will be sailing the same course, but the two marks that they have spent so much time reaching towards and now reaching away from have been brought in much closer. So for the second lap, there is far less distance to cover. Helicopter shot down for 11th Hour Racing Team. They are in first place, but all the way back at the other end of the field is Guyot Environment Team Europe. They have had a bit of a tricky time here in Aarhus, getting themselves up to speed in the light winds. On board at the moment with Stanjic on the helm, the Olympian, trying to keep himself pretty in the groove, keep himself going. Benjamin Dutroux, the skipper of the boat, equally working hard and potentially pretty frustrated about the light conditions here, but very pleased to be back on the water and racing, I'm sure.
Just coming back just to the back of Malitza. Now we need to try to keep the wind and to keep the speed. I think that's the problem of the sea breeze coming and coming back.
The speeds across the fleet have really dipped down now. Just a few moments ago we were seeing 5.5 knots. Now the fastest boat is barely reaching 3 and the slowest boat is barely doing 1. Guyot Environment Team Europe, 2.4 knots. Down at the back of the fleet in 5th place, just ahead of them, Team Milizia in 2nd, 2.2 knots. But look at how little breeze there is in that masthead code 0. It almost looks to me like they're starting to furl up that masthead code 0. Maybe it's just turned into too much of a hindrance.
Yeah, it gets to a point once it starts flapping where it actually just creates drag, and you really need to make that decision of when you're better off without it and just trying to find new pressure to deploy it. Very often we get to a position furled, so we've just got a little bit of it out until we're sure we've got pressure in and we've got confidence to deploy again. So it isn't because there's a big shift necessarily, it's just because it's flapping around not helping.
You see Boris there canting the keel, but perhaps more importantly, the sail coming out on the other side. This could be the first telltale sign of that new gradient breeze coming in. We can also see on Guyot the sail starting to back, and perhaps they're getting that same wind shift.
Amazing how quickly that transition has finally happened. It didn't seem like they were becalmed for too long. They were filling the sails on one side. Now the furl, the deploy on the new side. So what we thought was just tucking the sail away to reduce drag is potentially the enormous wind shift. And maybe it's the boats at the back of the field that are getting it first. As we look forward from the deck of Guyot Environment Team Europe, the question is, are those boats in the lead also sailing on this new jibe? The speeds with them right now, very light. Team Malizia, that head sail is out on the right-hand side of your picture as we look at it now. 11th Hour Racing Team, both head sails furled at the moment, and that main has got nothing in it right now, Dee.
Yeah, that's painful. That'd be painful for them too, as they're looking at the other boats thinking that they've got the pressure on the other side, where's ours? But they're not going to deploy until they're confident. So there's actually no rush. They're not, speed-wise, they're not doing any different to any other boat at the moment. So they'd rather wait till they're confident and can make it work. Because they've still got that issue of the battens in the mainsail again that we discussed earlier.
Update from the race control boat. We are cancelling the second lap. This will not come as a shock to anybody, a relief to the teams out in the water. So we are going to see our 5 IMOCAs round Mark 3, Mark 4, and then back through that start-finish line. And then they can sail out towards the wider seas, if indeed they can find a little bit of breeze. All the head sails furled on 11th Hour Racing Team, just waiting to see the breeze. But at least for Charlie Enright, 11th Hour Racing Team, they've got a bit of distance. They can not feel the presence of those boats right behind.
Absolutely. It's you'd always prefer to be at the front of the fleet, regardless of what the wind's doing. And I think this transition is good news from the bigger picture perspective. This breeze should fill in from the northwest and will allow the teams to make their way south toward Kiel.
Zero wind out on the racetrack. Team Holcim PRB, they have their masthead code 0 out, but there is nothing in it. Look at these boat speed. And I would argue, Dee, that that's pretty much drifting in any language.
It is, and they're going to have to watch that. This is kind of par for the course for this initial part of the leg, actually. When they leave that leaving gate, not much will change. That wind will be aft of the beam, and with it being super light, it's going to be very hard, as we saw when they first bore away, to keep boat speed. So it's really going to be a matter of focus and patience for these sailors as they head off, just trying to get anything they can find. It's actually easier in daylight. There's quite a lot of daylight up this end of the world. It doesn't get dark, so that would be quite helpful for them to be able to see the pressure on the water as it's coming.
And also, there's a strange factor that this was predicted. So in a way, for the navigators, this means that the models that they've been using to make their decisions on, they're good, they're accurate. So sort of a comfort.
Yeah, it gives them a lot of confidence. The worst thing is when you think something's going to happen and what the reality is so different, then you're really confused. You don't know where you are on the model. But this will really give them confidence as they look further down the track to make the decisions of when they go close to a shoreline, close to a headland, or stay clear. That will really kind of clarify their decision making.
The masthead code 0 now out on the port side for 11th Hour Racing Team, and I'm willing it to fill here, Mark, but almost there. A little bit of work to do for Francesca Klapčić here. It's not just about pulling the sail out. There's some subtle adjustments.
Yeah, Frankie's actually bringing the lead in, trying to presumably get a little bit more camber in that sail. It is all about these small adjustments, and particularly when you have a big dramatic wind shift like this, you're just trying to get the sails established, get a little bit of boat speed going, and basically get on with the new wind direction.
Look at the yellow flag here on that 3-masted spectator boat out there. That yellow flag is moving. Now, I know that the spectator boat is gently moving forward, but they weren't a moment ago, and I think there's just a little bit of breeze starting to come in from the top. Of course, it will be above the water first. It will be coming down from the sky. You'll feel it first right in the top of your sails. 11th Hour Racing Team, they put that masthead code 0 back away, but perhaps they had a little bit of a chance to test, see what the breeze was doing there. Now they've decided that actually it's best just to keep it away, because as you say, Dee, ultimately, you're going to have to decide where that breeze is coming from. Then you're going to have to start that very difficult work of getting your batten set on the correct tack.
That's right, and the difference in the breeze, they may be able to feel it in temperature as well. We've had a thermal breeze coming from the southeast. This is now a northwesterly breeze coming off the land. and it will have a different feel about it. It'll smell different, it'll feel different in temperature. So the sailors will be recognizing that this is the real transition, but it's just taking quite a long time to fill in. That's the frustration for them.
It's changing its mind as well. Bioterm and Team Holcim PRB now have their head sails out on the starboard side again. For all these sailors, it's going to be pretty challenging. This is where you need people like Annie Lush on Guyot Environment Team Europe who understand how to win.
They've just shortened. We were supposed to be doing a 2-lap kind of import before we leave, but now we're just going to complete this lap and go. Or probably just stay here, as it seems.
We probably should try to deploy on the same side again.
Yeah, it looks like for us on the numbers, it's still the same side.
I'd say that that's the attitude that you want there, Mark, of anybody. You know, you want somebody who is going to be pretty calm under any situation and just take it within a stride. Is that when you're selecting sailors, do you're looking at the mentality as well, not just sailing skill?
Yeah, from my perspective, whenever you're trying to build a team, whether it's in sailing or otherwise, you of course want to start with really talented people. I think that's the bare minimum. But after that, it's all the intangibles. It's personality. It's how do you work together as a team? How do you respond under stress? And Annie is an incredibly strong teammate. Benjamin and Robert speak incredibly high of her, and she's been a part of this team for a long time.
Little bit of breeze in that head sail, or certainly just enough to encourage it to curl out onto that starboard side. Team Holcim PRB definitely have something. They're also setting that sail. Both Guyot Environment Team Europe and Team Holcim PRB both on the same tack, both of their sails on the starboard side, port tack. And look ahead here of Abby Ehler. She's watching Bioterm forward. And again, they're also on that same tack. The breeze has changed, Dee, and then it's changed back again.
It's all about reacting to what the reality is that they're feeling, and it could be different from boat to boat. So Abby there was commenting on Bioterm ahead of them of where their pressure was and what side their sail was. But it could be that they end up feeling something different. So they really need to react with what they've got whilst being aware of everybody else.
Useful to point out at this point that blue boat in the background. I mean, I think, if I know my history here, Mark, that is the old Ilbruck. And of course, on this leg, we're going to go past Kiel, and those two things there go together quite nicely.
Yeah, there's some legendary shots of Ilbruck sailing into Kiel almost 20 years ago. I think the amount of people that are expected, it sounds like over 100,000 spectators are expected in Kiel tomorrow, and over 1,000 boats in the water. So it should be quite the spectacle.
It's very challenging for your teams as well, for the sailors, to make their way up the Kiel Ford. But when they do, as you say, the welcome is going to be very enthusiastic. And that boat there, Ilbruck, was, of course, the winning boat in its edition of the Ocean Race. And it won it in Kiel on that final destination. So great to see it out on the water here and welcoming the sailors, or should I say, saying goodbye to the sailors as they round off this import section at the start of leg 6. Team Holcim PRB now with a little bit of breeze, and Mark there, that wind turbine turning.
Yeah, I just need to see that wind turbine moving in the background. Maybe that's a sign of some new breeze to come.
It's certainly turning, it's definitely moving. The question will be the direction, but I think that is turning from the better direction here. So the wind has changed back again, and potentially we could be seeing it building to the better direction. It's all forecast. The question is it going to come true? Drifting conditions here in Aarhus. All the boat speeds very low, into the decimal places. The funny thing, though, when you're going so slow, is that actually if you can get one puff, if your competitor's doing half a knot and suddenly you're doing 2, it's so much easier to overtake. It's almost easier than if you're all doing 30 knots.
Exactly. The percentage of gain you get between 1 and 2 knots with half a knot compared to half a knot when you're doing 30 knots is obviously so different. So it really is every puff every little flap of a sail makes a massive difference, which is why they're so exhausted by the concentration.
Let's get the latest from the racetrack and the latest insight from the weather. We've got Thomas Julian down there. Thomas, are we starting to see this new breeze coming in?
It's difficult to tell. All the boats are all the time furling and unfurling the J0 and changing tacks and trying to, I can see right now Biotherm trying to pop their mainsail onto starboard tack again. I did notice, I think you said something about the windmills in the background to the north. I see them turning quite quickly, but I can't tell from here which direction this wind is coming from. So I don't know if it's a new wind or the old wind that we used to have here. At the moment, it's anyone's guess from which direction the wind is going to come from.
You mentioned battens here, Thomas, and of course, the battens, the sails, and the age of the sails is going to make such a difference. I know that in your position of the class measurer, you are privy to some information that you can't share with us. But in terms of life of the sails, who's got the newest J0 that we're seeing out here? Who's got the advantage in that?
That's a good question, and I think on J0 we stand almost on equality. Now I see the sails from close up, and on a lot of them you can tell that those sails have worked hard going around the globe. But I mean, the crews are very aware that it's a limiting factor for them. It's part of the rules for that race. The number of sails they were allowed to change, only 4 sails to go around the world. So they're being very careful with the sails, and overall the sails are in, I would say, in a better shape than I was fearing at this stage of the race.
They've certainly done the miles, and they've definitely been through all manner of conditions. It's not just about the wind as well, the UV damage and all of the heat and the cold and the furling, the unfurling. These sails are built to last, and it's nice to see them still here. But look at the difference in speed. Gouya Environment Team Europe, they've got the best speed at the moment, just a shade over 2 knots. Team Militia as well, nearly at that 2-knot mark. Meanwhile, 11th Hour Racing Team at the slower of the speeds is the wind building from the back. The Americans are starting to edge closer to Mark 3. That's going to be that left-hand turn, and then what should be the tack to get to Mark 4 before going through that start-finishing line. And then this inshore section of leg 6 is pretty much complete. Then they can start sailing out. But as you were saying, Dee, ultimately they don't really have the breeze. They're going to be thinking here about single boat length progress.
That's right, one step at a time. As Annie said, you know, then we'll be off. But actually, if they actually feel like they're leaving the Bay of Aarhus, but it's about you know, taking it. Okay, in this puff we can do this. In the next hour we can do that. Not thinking too far ahead, because if they do that, they'll be under pressure to make certain headlands by certain times, and they just got to sail with what they've got. And at the moment, it looks super painful for them, which would be super frustrating because they know how hard this next little bit is. It's like they'd like to get clean away so then they can just focus on the job ahead. But they'll be relieved that the race management have compromised and reduced this import section. So what it means when they can get through the leaving gate is it means they've got options. They're not confined to the course of going around this square. They can then chase the patches of breeze on the water a little more freely and keep the boat moving, which is probably slightly more important than what direction they're going in initially.
They are all managing to make way to the next turning mark. They are all finding a little bit of something coming through. Mark, the instruments up the top of the masts, the wind speed sensor turning. I mean, that's so important for these sailors. They'll be glued to those numbers.
Yeah, you can see how slow those cups are moving. Obviously not a lot of wind up there. But it looks like perhaps we found a little puff here. We see a little bit of heel in the boat. The keel could be to leeward, so it could be deceptive. But regardless, it does look like the boat's moving forward, and hopefully that's a good thing for 11th Hour Racing Team.
And if it is new breeze, it's a really strong position for the Americans because 11th Hour Racing Team have been able to get going without having to come up. D, it almost looks like the entire fleet have been rotated to the right, putting 11th Hour Racing Team much more to leeward where progression needs to be made.
That's right, especially if we look at their orientation to the mark that they've got to go around. But you can just see 11th Hour in a dark patch of breeze, which is that little puff that we're seeing them accelerate in. And the others went chasing those patches of breeze, so they've done the extra distance. So lucky for 11th Hour Racing, they're benefiting now from having that breeze come to them.
11th Hour Racing Team managing to make some distance forward. They are being chased down by the rest of the fleet, being led by Bioterm in second place. They're working hard to chase down the Americans.
Tricky, Mariana?
Yes, so it's really tricky, this start of the leg. We started with some like wind, 7 knots maybe, 6 knots, and then we had no wind at all. Now there is some wind coming, but we started the wind coming from that side, and now it's coming from that side. So yeah.
Transition is
yeah, we are just in the middle of the transition, I guess. So.
Well, the breeze is starting to come in now. Certainly the action is following on Bioterm. They are desperately trying to get that J0 around on the other side. Look how much it's changed just in that moment to go on board there. We see Jive for Team Holcim PRB and another one for 11th Hour Racing Team. This long-reaching leg has turned into a true downwind course. 11th Hour Racing Team have jibed now, and the mark that they're aiming for is out of shot to the right-hand side. I would say that Charlie Enright is pretty much laying that mark. Team Holcim PRB, they are going to have multiple jibes to go. So progress here for the Americans in first place.
As you can see, it's extreme sailing out here. We've just had the puff of the day, which is probably about 3 knots of wind. We're stuck in a bit of a transition between a southerly breeze and a northerly breeze, and yeah, they've shortened the course, so we've just literally got to get ourselves around these next couple of marks through the start line, and then we'll be off. But yeah, as you can see, with lots of breeze, so really struggling to keep the boat moving. But yeah, got to make the most of the breeze that we've got.
How's our position changed with the others?
Oh, time to come out there, time to leave Abby Ehler back to concentrating. Team Holcim PRB finding a little bit of breeze, and D, I can see it. I can see it on the water just behind them. Team Militia's using it as well.
Yeah, and these shots are great to explain how we talk about the patches of breeze on the water and trying to link them together. Once they're free of the confines of the course, that's what the sailors will be doing, trying to link the patches together to keep moving. And it's really frustrating if you're not close enough to one to hook into it. So you just got to sail with what you've got sometimes.
You can see in that previous shot the big angle differences. Holcim PRB with the puff there able to sail quite a bit lower than the boats in front. It'll be interesting to see if that breeze does come down and if 11th Hour Racing Team can bear away and lay the mark. If not, they'll have to do 2 jibes, which it looks like they may be committing to now.
Almost seems like the American boat has not actually popped their batons onto the other jibe. They're actually sort of ready to go on this jibe now. This rounding, it is not certain here for Charlie Enright. Bioterm behind has some wind. They're not sailing at a particularly efficient direction to get down to the bottom. Likewise for Team Holcim PRB. But right now, D, you'd go anywhere. You'd go in any direction as long as you were moving, just to try and link up the areas where there's wind.
That's right. I mean, yes, there is a course to do, but it's kind of secondary to keeping momentum, keeping movement, because as soon as you stop, you've got no steerage and then you can't go anywhere. So at least by moving, you've got some drive and some opportunity to eventually be going in the right direction. These patches are getting few and far between, but you can hear from all the sailors, they're in this transition, they know it, they can feel some of the pressure on their hands, it's just not ruffling their hair yet. So it's super light.
And they are desperately trying to come down. Charlie Enright is putting in that extra jibe, trying to make their way downwind. possibly, well, I was going to say possibly at the danger of sailing out of the breeze, but actually I think there is wind coming in from this side of the course. You can see it close to the shoreline, right the way up there, Mark. The wind is coming.
Yeah, quite a dark patch up there, and we can see the wind turbines spinning in the background as well. So wouldn't be surprised to see the breeze fill in here relatively quickly and see the boats get going and get off on their way to keel.
Another jibe to go for 11th Hour Racing Team. That J0 is going to be furled and then deployed on the new side, but they're going to keep that momentum where they can. Jibing too early here and sailing in on a deep angle into that mark is going to be really painful in terms of speed. Earlier on in this race, albeit when the breeze was a lot higher, we saw just how cute they like to stay to the breeze. The wind just going a little bit light there. That J0 just losing the wind.
Yeah, obviously bearing away is a little bit of a loss in speed there temporarily, but it does look like that wind patch up there is solid, and I'm optimistic that this breeze will fill in here in the next little bit.
11th Hour Racing Team coming up to this jibe, and now goes the furl on the J0 and the turn for Charlie Enright. So they are going to be rounding Mark III in first place. They've held their nerve. Behind them, Bioterm and Team Holcim PRB having to sail much more distance here. They're really sailing their way off to the right-hand side, while Team Milizia and Guyot Environment Team Europe with the black sails coming down to the left, riding a little bit of pressure here. If Charlie Enright can come round the bottom here, he'll be very relieved, because it is unclear as to exactly what the breeze is going to do behind. Guyot Environment Team Europe have an opportunity to come back here. I mean, we saw Philip on the water before trying to find the breeze. Perhaps they have.
There's big pressure on the shore. They are sailing in with wind. So in 20 minutes we have it. You see, there's sailing boats moving with wind directly offshore. You already see it over here. 10? A lot compared to this.
Trying to find a little bit of positivity there, D, and even though that's going to take an awfully long time for the breeze to get to them, I mean, now they're starting to feel it. You've got to make your move now to get into the breeze, and where it's going to be in 15 minutes, because it's going to take you that time just to get going.
Well, that's right. The interesting thing is where that breeze is going to hit first. Is it going to hit the back of the fleet first, so they bring it forwards to the ones in front? You know, Charlie Enright at the moment is sailing away from that coastline, so the others could bring that breeze to him. So they've identified it. We know it's coming. They're actually in really good pressure now, Milizia and Guyot Environment. They've got pretty good boat speed compared to the others. So he had every right to be super positive. It was just the fact that he said it'd take 15 to 20 minutes to get there.
11th Hour Racing Team round Mark III, leading at the moment at the start of leg 6 for the 14th edition of the Ocean Race. The split in the fleet that we have seen here, with Team Holcim PRB and Bioterm heading off to what was the right-hand side of the course, looking upwind, and Team Milizia and Guyot Environment Team Europe coming down with that new pressure. I mean, for 11th Hour Racing Team, you guys are around the bottom, but there's a big question as to what's going to happen behind.
Yeah, with this breeze filling in and us actually sailing away from the coast, that could be a disadvantage, but very happy to be out in front, and it does look like there's enough pressure to keep the sails full. We do have momentum, and that is key in these light air.
And an awful lot of twist on that mainsail. I keep coming back to it, but that J0D was all the way out. That bottom of that main was right the way up. You need a completely different sail shape with these kind of conditions.
Well, it's really a case of identifying any shear and making sure your trim is appropriate for what you've got. And it's about letting them breathe, letting them try and capture as much pressure as possible. You can't just sheet on because you're going upwind. It just doesn't work like that. The good news in this instant is, yes, Guyot Environment was at the back of the fleet, but they're actually not losing very much because no one's going very far, very fast. So, you know, they're still in this race, which is a great way to have them back in the race, starting this leg.
Still, the breeze is with the Americans right now. I mean, these questions keep remaining as to where that breeze is going to go, but they are sailing clear. To windward of them, Bioterm, Team Wholesome, PRB, they are getting locked into an incredible battle. But look how much that dark patch now is coming down. It is only 200-300 meters away to windward. Team Wholesome, PRB are going to get it before Bioterm. Somehow, 11th Hour Racing Team seems to have it, Mark. I mean, what on earth are your team doing there?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but we have done a nice job at maintaining the speed.
Who has fallen on the throttle? That's what I want to know.
We're using the Iron Genoa. No. wouldn't be doing that, but we've done a nice job here, and this is a really interesting battle here between Holcim and Biotherm. Let's see how it's going.
Team Wholesome PRB to windward of Biotherm, and that breeze is starting to come down. If Benjamin Schwartz can hold that position, watch the luff here on Biotherm, the boat on the right. There will be a point, if Benjamin Schwartz and the Swiss team can keep moving forward, where they will steal the breeze of Bioterm, and there it is happening now. The top of the J0 of Bioterm has not got any breeze in it. Team Holston PRB are stealing all the wind out there. Behind Guyot Environment, Team Europe and Team Militia, they are jibing and crossing, but look at this coming into the bottom of the mark here. Team Holston PRB need to sail clear over the bows of Bioterm. Bioterm have the right of way. They are the inside. It's going to be a left-hand turn for these two boats. They are going to turn towards the right-hand side of our picture. Bioterm just have enough. If they can keep that overlap, they're going to be able to hold on to second place. Benjamin Schwartz bears the boat away. Johan Rashom on the helm. It is very, very close now between these two teams. The outriggers, the foils are sticking out as we go on board to listen in.
Talk about an appropriate amount of wind coming into Holcim just at the right time there to let them over the top of Biotherm. That was super close. I actually wondered if that was going to be a bit of a protest from Paul Mayat there, not being happy about it being overtaken. But Holcim seemed to be clear ahead. He did have room to turn his bow and it didn't put them under pressure. And while we were watching that drama, the drama that was going on behind with Militia sailing away from the pressure coming towards them and crossing Guyot Environment, I actually thought that was going to be quite an interesting manoeuvre. And now we see them looking like they're going to drive back on to do the same course as Guyot Environment.
We have got everything going on in this one shot, haven't we? We've got Guyot Environment, Team Europe, potentially slipping past Team Militia. The German team jibing, but they've got no speed at all to turn up. Meanwhile, second and third, Team Holcim PRB are edging ahead of Bioterm. But if Paul Mayer can keep an overlap coming into Mark IV, they will be able to hold the Swiss boat wide. Mark, I mean, everything in one shot here. The battle for second, third, and fourth, fifth.
Yeah, there's some good match racing going on here. If Biotherm can maintain an overlap position, then they will have rights at the mark. So Holcim will be looking to extend, try to head up, potentially break that overlap when they get to the mark. And Biotherm will be looking to maximize their speed forward and try to hold that overlap as long as they can.
Meters, centimeters, millimeters are going to matter here. Team Holcim PRB desperately need to find a little bit of speed. They have got a slight edge there. We're just seeing the numbers a little bit in the Swiss boat's favor, but they must make sure that they are clear ahead. But look at the course that they need to make here to Mark IV. They are going to need enough room to jibe and sail across the bows of Bioterm, and I'm not sure really that they are going to have the pace to do it here. At the moment, both of these two are on starboard, and Bioterm, I think, have done the damage here, Mark. They have jibed now, and Johan Rashom just needs to, well, I mean, find what little breeze is left.
Yeah, this will be really interesting because we've got Biotherm jibing here, giving up their advantage, so they must feel confident that they're laying the mark. But interestingly, Holcim PRB have not jibed. They're choosing to extend.
Johan Rashom keeping cool. Abby Elop forward, using just the upper body there to furl that J0. If you can do it, it's quicker, but that certainly takes a lot of energy. Team Holcim PRB, when they get going now, they are going to be definitely following the stern of Bioterm as more and more of that breeze comes in from the top of the course.
Yeah, lucky there. That was a really bold move from Beotherm going early. I thought they would have stood on and forced Holcim to go the long way round. But because in this light breeze, to have the confidence that you were going to lay that next mark was really cool. But they did it, and they seem to be accelerating now. They seem to have a nice puff of pressure. And while all this has been going on, 11th Hour have actually done a manoeuvre and have been going back onto the course. So everything's happening. And we still don't have that solid pressure from the shoreline getting to the fleet yet, but it's coming.
Look at 11th Hour Racing Team here. We have got 5 IMOCAs clearly in one shot. I can completely understand what's happening with second and third. Guyot Environment Team Europe are now up to 4th on the left-hand side of your screen. Team Militia looks set to be following the European boat Stern into Mark 3, but 11th Hour Racing Team are now becalmed. We've got the race committee boat on the right-hand side. All that the Americans need to do is cross an imaginary line between the race committee boat on the right-hand side of the picture and then the white and blue mark right in the middle of your screen. If they cross that line, then they can continue up to that leaving gate. I say continue up, it's only 5 lengths in front of that line. Then they are free to sail their course off towards Kiel. But the distance is starting to close down here. Mark, the boats in second and third definitely have the breeze with them.
Yeah, the boats in second and third were able to have quite a bit of an advantage there, having the breeze fill in, while it looked like 11th Hour Racing Team really just needed to get back closer to the shore to get into that new breeze. But I think on board here, all the navigators will be quickly changing their focus to what are they going to do once they go through this leaving mark. The breeze has obviously filled from the shoreline, and so they need to maintain that breeze, but ultimately they need to start getting south toward Kiel. And so how do you manage that? How do you manage that decision?
You're absolutely right. We talk about this section of the race finishing, but I mean, Dee, the headache, the hard work, the sort of nightmare decision making, I mean, it's only just begun.
That's right. I mean, we're excited and exhausted from watching this and following this. But as you say, they've got a long 24 hours ahead before that breeze fills in properly with fresh breeze for them to go around that turning mark in Kiel and head back out. So it's a lot more of this, which you can see how stressful it's been. But fair play, Guyot's coming round in front of Militia there in pressure and accelerating. So they've done a really good job there.
Okay, I think we can almost start, Evan. No?
It's light winds and it's sunny, but the reason that people are pretty much wrapped up in their survival suits is those are the leg jumpers, the guests that have been on board these boats, as we narrow in on that incredible battle there for the jibe. This is how the leg jumpers are getting picked up out of the water from the safety boats out there. This is the moment where the jumper leaves the water, and I can confirm that the water is incredibly cold here in Aarhus. I think if you're local, you've got the stomach for it. But for all our sailors that we see in the morning, taking an early morning dip, it's definitely pretty chilly. Now the breeze with 11th Hour Racing Team, they have got some strong pressure now. It's starting to come down, it's starting to fill in, it's starting to be able to take them down south towards Kiel. First place at the leaving gate is 11th Hour Racing Team. Charlie Enright held his nerve and managed to hop from light wind patch to gust to absolutely feather tight control, fingertips on the tiller, and now it comes true. He has got maybe 200 meters to his advantage, but behind them the boats also have the breeze now. Beotherm second place, they managed to slip ahead of Team Holcim PRB. And they will also now face that difficult decision about the correct angle to make on that downwind. D, almost at this point now with the course being freed up, you leave the departure gate. The decisions, they're more open, but now you're forced to actually decide something. How on earth do you decide the best way to go downwind?
That's right, but the navigators have spent days preparing this. They've spent days looking at the weather, days looking at the course. They've looked at the obstacles, they've looked at the hazards, they've looked at the wind and the accelerations and the shadows. So they will have had a strategy in place, and now they know where they are in relation to the wind file and how accurate it is. So whether they can execute or whether they have to adapt slightly. So on this last leg, they will have been checking that, making sure they're aligned, and then they're looking for it. So 11th hour are striding ahead, but they're also a really good indicator for the rest of the fleet of what's going on. So it's a tough place to be. But the others, obviously, you know, it's so hard to make the gains. Being at the front is good, but it's a tough place to be.
Very tough if Team Holcim PRB are sailing down in this much pressure. 11th Hour Racing Team are out in the lead, but it's the boats behind that will get the building win first. And we see Mark Abiela darting around the boat. They're getting ready for a sail change.
Yeah, Abby's doing a great job getting the outriggers out, or the jockey poles as they're called, which are, you know, really help extend the downwind sails outboard and really create a better shape. You can see a nice shot with Biotherm there. They're really just a few boat lengths ahead. The racing's still quite tight.
Very tight, and if we can get a good deployment for Team Holcim PRB, they're going to find the edge. I'm looking across the water, and I think I could see similar activity on Biotherm. Both teams now going into that downwind gear.
Interesting that Abby was actually setting up the weather outrigger there and not the leeward one, which could mean that they're getting ready to jibe. Oh, here goes the leeward one, so I stand corrected.
Quick wave to the shore crew, wave to the people that have been so much effort going on in all of these teams. Such a big contribution made by everybody ashore that we focus so much on the sailors, but the dismasting of this boat and of Guyot Environment Team Europe, all the heartache for Biotherm on the last leg really brings it home as to just how important and motivated, passionate, and of course skilled shore crew are.
It's also really good, these outriggers are almost to extend the length of the boat. So what we do is we put the outriggers on, and it makes you feel like you've got another 20 foot of boat behind you. Longer waterline length, the trimming is adjusted, it helps the sail trim accelerate the boat. And coming in behind that we can't see now, these are in decent conditions with decent boat speeds, but the boats behind are actually coming at these guys with that breeze. So look, we've got a really nice angle here with Militia powered up, Guyot Environment Team Europe coming in with the new pressure. So they're already in this new breeze, they've got the transition breeze. They're just hoping now that transition sails with them, it stays with them and they don't sail out of it.
You can see where the edge of the breeze is. I mean, they are in real danger, 11th Hour Racing Team, and in fact all our leaders of sailing out of it. At the moment, Team Militia is up at around 13 knots, just dipping down there as they bear away. Meanwhile, in first place, the Americans are down at 8.7 knots. So a huge speed difference, as you were saying earlier, Dee, in terms of percentages, this is where we'd expect the fleet to compress.
That's right, and suddenly it makes no difference where they were. Suddenly it's almost a restart again, and we're going to have lots of that during this first 24 hours. We're going to extend, we're going to compress, we're going to extend, we're going to compress. Who handles those transitions will be the one that gets in front. And what's really nice, you said it was a 3-horse race. We've got so little points between 11th Hour Racing, Holcim PRB and Militia, but actually having Biotherm and Guyot Environment in there can really spread those points. So those two players, although they're not racing for the win, are critical in what the results will be.
And those results, if you want them to go the way of the German team, for Team Militia, they are, as you're saying, in third place. They're a little bit adrift. They're 4 points off first, and they do really, Mark, they need to have two very strong legs here.
Yeah, they do. The pressure is certainly on, but Boris and Will and the whole team, they're incredibly focused. They've got a great boat. You can see they've got a lot of pressure right now, and they're coming back into the fleet. I would not count them out.
Again, as we're on board with Team Militia, sail changes, gear changes, setting up the boat for the downwind. They're still moving nicely. They've still got some absolutely great breeze. Boris and Will working out the weather. Now, if you're talking about who's in the lead based on who is furthest downwind, I would say that Biotherm at the moment is looking very strong there, Dee. They've been able to sail deeper than 11th Hour Racing Team.
Indeed, and if we think back to leg 2 when they left the Cape Verdes, they were very strong in those downwind, light wind conditions. And that is basically what we're going to have all the way to Kiel. So these are conditions that they feel very comfortable in, they feel quite confident, and they want to see their boat perform at the same level that we saw in that leg. So it'd be really interesting to see if they can maintain that.
You can see the front boats just basically on the edge of the wind there in that heli shot, and basically I would not be surprised if the entire fleet compresses up here. Malizia and Gio a little bit faster than the boats in front, and ultimately the speed of the boats is going to be dictated by how quickly that northwesterly breeze continues to fill in.
You're almost watching the boats in front thinking, surely you just slow up a little bit, just let a little bit more of the wind sort of fill in. All the head sails now furled on Bioterm. This is the boat that potentially I would say is vying to take the lead, certainly taking the little bit more downwind course. And D, the Spinnaker here potentially coming out to play.
Yeah, they've definitely set up for this sail change. They've plugged it in, so they're going to go for this. And that was a real key change for them in leg 2 at the start when it was light downwinds. So they're hoping this will stay as their advantage, because they have a limited number of sails they can carry. They choose the sails for the leg, and they've chosen this because it worked for them last time, and given the forecast, that was a good call.
Mark, I know that sail choice is pretty critical, and I know that all the teams are pretty secretive about it, but as we watch Bioterm put up the Spinnaker, I mean, surely I'm guessing you guys have got a Spinnaker on board as well in this predicted to be light wind race?
Yeah, so we call this the A2, and it's really the only free-flying Spinnaker on board these boats. And there is a difference in how they're set up. You see Biotherm has essentially a snuffer or a sock. That's what holds the Spinnaker together and allows them to hoist it up, get it on the lock and get it set, and then when they go to pull the sheet on, the sock raises up to the top of the mast. So here we see it going, and very shortly that sail will be full, and then they'll work toward getting that J0 down.
D, we always talk about the difference of sails, and we throw out J0, J2. I mean, essentially we're just talking about sails that get bigger and smaller, pretty much. But with these Spinnakers, with these kind of loose luff sails, the shape is so different from any of those other head sails.
That's right, and it just allows them to get much more airflow. It's greater surface area. They can really get that pull driven. But each boat will have a slightly different design as well. It's not a uniform sail across the fleet. So how you want to put it in, and we can just see in the background, we've got Biotherm deployed their A2, and we've got 11th hour driving across, staying in that pressure. They didn't want to sail out past that line where it goes light again. They're driving and staying in that pressure.
11th hour racing team jibing now. Can they cross the bows of Bioterm? A big difference in sail choice here, but the Americans desperately trying to stay in the breeze as Bioterm sets up longer on this jibe for a soft downwind, soaking with that breeze for as long as they can. All of our 5 IMOCAs are going to need to make their way down south. The next big obstacle is going to be that approach into Kiel, and the weather is going to be dictating so much of the tactics that we will see over the next few hours. For the moment, 11th hour racing team put in a rather nice jibe and stay with the breeze. But look how much of the wind is behind. Team Milizia still very much closing down on the other 4 teams ahead. Who pitches themselves into the best breeze is going to make all the difference in this race. We've seen place changes in this racetrack, but at the moment, as we leave here in Aarhus, these are the place changes at the start of leg 6. 11th hour racing team in first place in the breeze at the moment, with Bioterm in second and Team Wholesome PRB in third. Guyot Environment Team Europe slipping past the German teams and up into fourth, with Team Milizia now down in fifth. Good breeze out on the course at the moment for our teams, but it has been an incredible adventure just to get to this point. The wind changing all the time for this inshore section at the start of leg 6. And it all started with very different conditions indeed. What you are seeing now has taken an age to build. Back at the start, we had enough breeze to push ourselves over the line, but Team Milizia used a little bit too much of it. And as the gun fired, the German boat was clearly over the line, having to unwind themselves and sail back to clear their error. It was all down to Team Wholesome PRB and their aggressive move, dialing into that leeward position and putting Will Harris and Boris Herman on the back foot, forcing them over the line early. Meanwhile, further down, Bioterm got a start at the pin, but it was 11th hour racing team with the strongest start from the middle. They held their line well into the first mark, defining the best of the breeze as behind them the rest of the fleet lined up in order, with Team Milizia doing a good job of coming back into the race and managing to slip past Guyot Environment Team Europe. Charlie Enright held the lead through that first short downwind section, always going to be tricky. And from there, the wind died further. It was a real battle to keep momentum up with all of the breeze slipping away from the sails, and as the helicopter shots confirmed, we at times saw the wind completely vanish on the racetrack. And meanwhile, when the new puff started to arrive, it reshuffled the deck. Team Holcim PRB and Bioterm getting into a real tussle on that final approach into Mark 3. Abiila trying to find the best way forward, and Bioterm hot on their heels, stealing the win coming in to Mark 4. For the Americans, they managed to sail clean and hold themselves out in front, and that is where we leave our fleet heading out from Aarhus, hoping that the breeze stays with them. Well, this leg is going to have the finish line in The Hague, but before then we are going to fly by Kiel. This was the location that Ilbruck won their edition of the Ocean Race. The German team getting an enthusiastic welcome, and with two German teams in this edition of the race, we are set to see some incredible sights on the water as all the spectators and fans will come out to welcome in our boats as they sail down the fjord before continuing back towards The Hague. Enough breeze in the air at the moment to get our boats moving as 11th Hour Racing Team now deploy their downwind sail, and the race to The Hague via the Kiel gets underway here. Thank you, Aarhus, for a fantastic start, but let's see what happens out in the water.
Leg 6 will be very coastal.
Around marks and headlands and shoals.
Very tiring. We will not have much sleep.
Not what the boats are designed to do, but we're going to do it.
Just give everything to become first in The Hague.